Rain drummed the glass corridor of Sterling headquarters, and a piano whispered like breath. Elias Bennett, single father, night janitor, rested his callous hands on the keys, guiding Constance Pierce, the girl in the wheelchair, through each note of morning light. Sweat beat on her forehead, trembling with the rhythm. He murmured, "Let the music lead half a step ahead." The half-open door reflected a shadow. Alexander Pierce, the icy CO, stood frozen. That song was an unfinished promise to her dead husband. The morning sun sliced through Sterling's steel tower, hitting the lobby's polished floor like judgment. KPI boards glowed green and red on every wall, tracking metrics that measured everything except what mattered: efficiency, optimization, results. The building smelled of ambition and cleaning solution, a combination that made visitors feel either inspired or anxious, depending on which side of the payroll they occupied. Somewhere on the 40th floor, Alexander Pierce signed a budget memo without looking up, her fountain pen moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had made 10,000 similar decisions. Her assistant placed another stack beside her elbow. At the bottom of the pile, marked with a yellow flag, sat a 2-week notice to close the Arts and Health Fund. Too costly, not measurable, no quantifiable return on investment. William Cross, the chief financial officer with silver temples and a reputation for ruthless efficiency, had been pushing for months. The numbers didn't lie, he'd say in every meeting. The numbers never lie. Alexandra initialed the document without reading it. She had trained herself not to feel anymore, or at least not to show it. Feelings were expensive in this building. They slowed down decisions. Complicated quarterly reports made shareholders nervous. She had a company to run, a daughter to raise alone, and a ghost she refused to name. Across the city, in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a window that stuck every time you tried to open it, Elias Bennett poured cereal into 2 chipped bowls. His daughter Astrid, 7 years old with bright eyes and perpetual dirt under her nails from the playground, asked between spoonfuls, "Dad, do you still remember how to play?" Her voice was casual, but her eyes weren't. Children always knew what questions cut deepest. He paused, milk carton suspended mid-pour. The piano had been silent since his wife died 3 years ago. Sold to pay medical bills that came too late to save anyone, that he changed the subject with practiced ease, kissed her forehead, and reminded her to brush her teeth. She left a star sticker on the table before heading to the bathroom. She collected them everywhere, stuck them on her backpack. Her bedroom ceiling, the bathroom mirror. Stars meant focus, she'd explained once. Stars meant counting your breath when you were scared. She'd learned that from a therapist after her mother died. When the nightmares got bad, Elias picked up the sticker silver with 5 points and slid it into his pocket. He didn't know why. Maybe because it was the only bright thing in a morning that smelled like instant coffee and unpaid electric bills at Sterling in a therapy room, painted soft yellow to evoke calm and hope. Vivian Moore watched Constance Pierce try to lift her right hand to shoulder height. Cerebral palsy made her muscles tight, unpredictable. Some days were better than others. Today wasn't better. Constance hated the tremor, hated how her fingers curled when she wanted them straight, hated the way people looked at her wheelchair first and her face second, if they looked at all. Vivian took notes in careful shorthand. Tremor increases under stress. Breathing shallow and rapid. Needs rhythm anchor for focus. She'd been working with Constance for 18 months. Ever since Alexander Pierce hired her with a quiet desperation that came through even in the formal contract language. "Help my daughter." The subtext read, "I don't know how anymore." Vivian suggested a breathing pattern. 3 counts in, 3 counts hold, 4 counts out. An ancient technique borrowed from meditation and adapted from motor control. Constance nodded, but her eyes drifted to the window where rain blurred the glass into abstract paintings. Outside, people rushed through their lives. Inside, time moved differently, slower, heavier. "Your mother mentioned you've been asking about music," Vivian said gently. Constance's jaw tightened. She said no. Too much stimulation, too many people. What if it was just you and the music? That's not how music works. Somebody always listens. In her corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that never apologized for anything, Alexander scrolled through the closure email one more time. The Arts and Health Fund had been Oliver's idea. Her husband, a composer who died too young with too much music still inside him, had believed music could heal what medicine couldn't touch. He'd pitched it to her over breakfast 3 years ago, sketching bar lines on a napkin and humming melodies she couldn't unhear even now. She'd signed off on it a week after his funeral, a tribute that felt like penance. But 3 years was long enough. William was right. There were no metrics, no ROI, no proof that anyone's life had measurably improved. The fund had cost the company $600,000 and produced exactly 0 case studies. Oliver had been a dreamer. She was a CEO. Those were different jobs. She clicked approve and felt nothing, or told herself she felt nothing, or felt so much that numbness was the only safe response. Henry Cole, head of security and the only person in management who still said good morning to the cleaning staff, made his rounds on the 15th floor. He noticed the baby grand piano in the unused music room gathering dust like a monument to abandoned intentions. A sign next to it read, "Sterling cares," but the letters were faded and someone had scratched graffiti into the corner. Asterisk does it, though. Nobody came here anymore. The room smelled like old wood and broken promises. Dante Wilkes, the chief operating officer with a master's degree in operational efficiency and a reputation for hating anything that couldn't be grafted, had already sent a memo. The room would be converted to a conference space by month's end. More seating for cross-functional synergy meetings. More whiteboards for ideation sessions. Henry disagreed, but said nothing. Rules were rules, even when rules were stupid. Even when rules slowly killed the soul of a place that used to believe it had one. He locked the door and moved on. 16 more floors to patrol before his shift ended. Ellis worked nights because childcare was cheaper and Astrid could sleep at a neighbor's. An elderly woman named Mrs. Kaplan, who knitted Afghans and asked for nothing except company on Jewish holidays. He mopped floors on autopilot, emptied trash bins that smelled of ambition and lukewarm coffee, wiped down conference tables where people made decisions that never touched them. Around 11, long after the last executive had gone home to houses with alarm systems and wine cellars, he passed the 15th floor and heard something wrong. A piano key played badly. Repeated wrong again. He stopped. Mop handle balanced against the wall. Sound carried differently at night, emptier, more honest. He followed it to a door that shouldn't have been open, a room that Henry must have forgotten to lock. Through the gap, he saw a girl in a wheelchair, maybe 10 years old, her right hand trembling over the keys like a bird with a broken wing. She was alone. She pressed the key, winced at the sour note, tried again. The same mistake, the same frustration. Elias recognized the sound, not the note, the feeling behind it. Someone learning, someone fighting. He stepped inside, quietly, not touching her, not getting close, just shifting his angle so she could see him in her peripheral vision. She startled anyway, her hands flying off the keyboard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm not supposed to be here. Please don't tell security." He knelt at a distance, 5 feet away, kept his voice low and steady. "What are you trying to play?" She studied him. Uniform up, skin darker than hers, hands that worked for a living. Her expression cycled through fear, suspicion, calculation. Finally, morning light. "My mom said it's about dawn, but I've never seen a real sunrise." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I can't get the F sharp right. My hand won't. It won't listen to me." Elias looked at the keys, dust-covered and patient. He hadn't touched a piano in 3 years. Not since they'd carried his wife's piano out of their apartment to pay for chemotherapy that bought them 4 extra months and a lifetime of medical debt. But his fingers remembered. Muscle memory lived deeper than grief. "May I show you something?" "I won't touch you. I won't touch the chair. Just listen." She nodded. Cautious. He sat on the bench, careful to stay on his side. His hands found the keys. And for the first time in 3 years, he played not much, just the opening phrase of Morning Light. A melody he'd heard his wife hum while doing dishes, while falling asleep, while dying, he played it slowly, breathing audibly. 3 counts in, 3 counts hold, 4 counts out. The F-sharp came not from force, but from waiting, letting the rhythm carry it like a leaf on water. If you're scared, he said quietly, let the music go half a step ahead. You follow, not the other way around. Constance stared at the keys. Then, moving like someone approaching a wild animal, she placed her trembling hand back on the keyboard. She breathed the pattern he'd shown her. 3 in, 3 hold for out. She pressed the sharp. It rang true. Clean. Perfect. She laughed. A small shock sound that came from somewhere she'd forgotten existed. Can I come back tomorrow? 5 minutes, Elias said. After I finish cleaning. If the door's open. What if it's not? Then maybe it wasn't meant to be. Behind the half-open door, Alexandra Pierce stood with her hand pressed against her chest, counting her own heartbeat to stay grounded. She had come down to retrieve a file she'd left in the old office, the one she'd worked in before the promotion, before the corner suite, before Oliver died, and she learned that corner suites were just prettier places to be alone. She'd heard the piano from the hallway, a sound that shouldn't exist in a building she'd ordered into silence. She'd heard Morning Light, Oliver's unfinished piece, the one he'd been writing when the stroke took him in their kitchen on a Tuesday morning while the coffee was still brewing. The one she'd never heard completed because he died with the melody in his head and his hands too still to play it. She should walk in. She should ask questions. She should do her job. But shame held her still. Shame that she had forgotten what the music sounded like. Shame that she was about to erase this room, this piano, this last piece of him. Shame that a janitor, a man whose name she'd never asked, remembered the song better than she did. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against marble like a metronome counting down. The next night, Constance was waiting in the music room when Elias arrived. And the night after that, and the one after that. He showed her how to anchor her breath before difficult passages, how to use the pedal to sustain notes when her hand cramped, how to count silently when panic rose and threatened to choke the music. He never touched her, never adjusted her posture, never crossed the invisible line that separated teaching from something else. He just played, demonstrated, breathed with her. On the 4th night, she asked, "Why are you helping me?" "Because somebody helped me once. Because music shouldn't die in empty rooms. Because I don't know." He paused. "Why does it matter? My mother says nobody does anything without wanting something. Your mother runs a company. Different rules. What are your rules? Show up. Tell the truth. Leave things better than you found them." She thought about that. The piano was dusty when we started. Then I'd better clean it before we leave. At home, Aster noticed the change. Her father hummed while washing dishes. Hummed. When she asked who he was teaching, he smiled a real smile. Not the careful one he used for parent-teacher conferences. Someone who needs to hear the music. Is she nice? She's brave. Braver than me. Different kind of brave. Astrid peeled a star sticker from her collection. The one she kept in a special box under her bed. The one she'd been saving for emergencies. She pressed it onto his hand. "For courage," she said, "for both of you." He stuck it on the first key of Morning Light the next night. Silver star on ivory, a marker of where the melody began and where fear had to be left behind. But rumors traveled faster than kindness in buildings where information was currency. An email from William Cross landed in Dante Wills's inbox on a Wednesday morning. Propose immediate closure of music room. Not cost-effective. Redirect resources to compliance training and leadership development. Recommend repurposing space by in a quarter. Dante forwarded it to Alexandra with a note. Awaiting your sign-off. Facilities management ready to move on this. At the same time, Vivian Morse sent her own email. Subject line progress report. Constance Pierce. She attached a therapy progress report with clinical language and measurable outcomes. Finger mobility increased by 12% over 2 weeks. Breathing pattern steadier during practice sessions. Music therapy demonstrating correlation with reduced anxiety and improved motor control. She attached a brief case study from a peer-reviewed medical journal about the neurological benefits of rhythmic training for children with cerebral palsy. Alexandra read it twice. Then she checked the security footage from the 15th floor. her clearance giving her access to feeds most people didn't know existed. She watched 3 nights of recordings at double speed, Elias arriving, Constance already waiting, the careful dance of teaching without touching, the way he cleaned the room afterward, leaving no trace of his presence except the faint warmth of the piano bench. He didn't take anything, didn't ask for anything. He just played and left. She sat back in her chair, thinking about rules and exceptions, about liability and love, about what Oliver would say if he could see this. Dante pushed harder. He scheduled a meeting with Henry Cole, bringing the facility use policy printed on official letterhead. We need a formal reprimand. Unauthorized use of company property after hours. Potential security risk. Potential liability if anyone gets hurt. Henry Cole, who had 32 years with Sterling and enough institutional memory to make him dangerous, hesitated. He's not damaging anything. The girl's making progress. Vivian's report confirms it. Clinical improvement. Dante's jaw tightened. Policy is policy, Henry. We don't make exceptions because we like the story. Write up the violation. And if I don't, then I will. And I'll include your failure to enforce protocol in the report. Henry wrote it up. He had a pension to protect, but he wrote it slowly. Then someone took a photo. Nobody knew who, though speculation ran through the building like a virus. A blurry shot through the glass. A man in a janitor's uniform, a girl in a wheelchair, a piano. The image made its way into the internal group chat. First the 15th floor, then facilities, then management. Speculation exploded. Is it the CEO's daughter? Why is a janitor teaching her? Is this authorized? Is this even legal? The photo reached a junior reporter who freelanced for the local paper and had a friend who worked in Sterling's mailroom. They sent an inquiry to Sterling's communications office. Can you confirm reports that Sterling CEO's daughter is receiving unauthorized piano lesson from a janitor? Seeking comment on safety protocols and employee conduct policies, Alexandra's phone buzzed during a board meeting, vibrating against the mahogany table like a heartbeat. The PR director had flagged it urgent. Potential story, possibly sympathetic but high risk. Risk of HIPAA concerns if Constance's condition gets mentioned. Risk of employee privacy violations. Risk of looking either negligent or cruel, depending on how they responded. Recommendation. Shut it down quietly. Issue a brief statement. End the arrangement. Move on. Alexandra excused herself from the meeting. She stood in the hallway, phone in hand, looking at the photo. Her daughter's face was turned away from the camera, but she recognized the set of her shoulders, the way Constance leaned forward when she concentrated. The man's face was partially hidden, but she knew who he was. Had known since the first night. Had watched him on security footage. Had checked his employment record. Elias Bennett hired 3 years ago. Night maintenance. Clean record. Never late. Never complained. She called an emergency meeting. Vivian Henry William Dante. She placed the therapy report on the conference table and stood at the window with her back to them. Before anyone speaks, read this silence. Except for pages turning, William flipped through quickly, his expression unchanging. Anecdotal data, sample size of 1, not scalable, not scientific. 2 independent doctors reviewed her progress. Vivian said, her voice steady, but her hands gripping her portfolio tight. Bard's certified physicians. The improvement is measurable and clinically significant. Dante leaned forward, his tone reasonable, which meant he was about to say something unreasonable. With respect, this is a liability issue. The janitor accessed secured property without authorization. We have protocols. We have rules. If we make exceptions, we open ourselves to lawsuits. What if something had happened? What if she'd gotten hurt? Alexandra cut him off. I'm authorizing a 7-day trial. Confidential, no publicity, no statements to the press. At the end of 7 days, Constance will perform a section of morning light in the glass hall in front of 2 independent physicians and our board. If she demonstrates measurable progress using objective clinical standards, we keep the fund and upgrade it. If not, we close the room and end the program permanently. William raised an eyebrow. And the janitor, no disciplinary action during the trial. But if this fails, we revisit everything. His employment, the program, all of it. That's not fair to him, Vivian said quietly. Fair? Alexandra turned from the window. Fair is a luxury I don't have. Fair is what I'm trying to give my daughter. Fair is 7 days instead of a termination letter. Take it or leave it. They took it. Elias didn't expect the meeting. Henry Cole found him during his shift around midnight, when the building was quiet except for the hum of ventilation systems and the distant sound of a late-night cleaning crew on the upper floors. Need you to come with me. 14th floor, conference room B. Am I in trouble? I don't know yet. The conference room smelled like expensive coffee and carpet cleaner. Dante Wilkes sat at the head of the table, reading from a printed document like a prosecutor at trial, unauthorized access, misuse of company resources, violation of facilities use policy, potential grounds for termination, pending review. Elias stood at the far end of the table, still in his uniform, still holding the mop he'd been using when Henry found him. He didn't defend himself, didn't explain, just listened. Then the door opened. Constance wheeled herself in, her hands shaking, but her voice clear. I asked him to teach me. It's my fault. Not his, Alexandra stood. She'd been sitting in the corner letting Dante run the meeting, watching to see what would happen. It's nobody's fault, but we need proof that this works. Friday noon, Glass Hall on the 20th floor. You'll play the opening section of Morning Light. 2 independent doctors will be there to assess your motor control, breath regulation, and anxiety management. If you can do it, we keep the music program. If you can't, we close it permanently. Constance's eyes widened in front of people. I can't. I freeze when people watch. I can't breathe right. Elias knelt beside her wheelchair, still not touching, keeping his voice low. You don't have to win them over. You just have to win the next note. That's all. One note at a time. She looked at him, then at her mother. Alexandra's expression gave nothing away, but her hand was pressed flat against the table, knuckles white with pressure. 7 days, she said. Starting now, they trained like soldiers. Day 1, Motif 1, the opening phrase. Elias taught Constance to breathe in rhythm with the melody 3 counts in, 3 counts hold, 4 counts out, and to place her focus on the star sticker Astrid had stuck to the first key. Where her hand cramped, which it did 6 times in the first 30 minutes, she stopped, breathed, started again. Alexandra watched from the doorway, no longer hiding, no longer pretending she wasn't there. Day 2, Motif 2, the transition to FP. This was the hardest part. The place where Constance's hand always locked up, where fear turned muscles into stone. Elias introduced active silence. When the fear hit, she would stop for exactly 1 beat, press the pedal lightly to sustain the last note, creating a bridge of sound across the gap, and then return. It wasn't perfection, it was control. Control was better than perfection. Day 3. Vivian brought a metronome and set it to Largo, the speed of a resting heartbeat. The ticking helped Constance regulate her breath and finger movements, gave her something to follow when her own rhythm failed. Progress was slow, measured in millimeters, but it was progress. Day 4. Astrid visited with her father during the lunch session Alexandra had authorized. She showed Constance how to count stars on her fingers when the panic rose and threatened to choke the music. You don't have to count all the way to 100. Just 5 stars, just enough to breathe. My therapist taught me after Mom died. Constance practiced counting while playing stars on her left hand, keys with her right. It worked. Not perfectly, but it worked. Day 5. Elias did something unexpected. He made her fail on purpose. He had her rush the transition, lose the rhythm, fumble the keys, hit wrong notes, stop, and restart badly. Then he taught her how to recover, how to find the rhythm again, how to slip and still come back. She needed to know that mistakes weren't the end, that perfection was a lie, that getting back up was the only truth that mattered. By the end of the session, she was laughing through the errors, understanding that music wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. At home that night, Elias sat at the kitchen table with a pencil and staff paper he'd bought at a music store he hadn't entered in 3 years. He didn't have Oliver's original score. Nobody did, as far as he knew. The composer had died with it unfinished. But Elias remembered the melody, remembered the harmonies his wife used to hum when she was alive, when she was well, when the future was still something they believed in. He sketched it out by ear, filling in the gaps with instinct and memory. Astrid peered over his shoulder, careful not to disturb him. Is that for the girl? He nodded for her. And for someone who couldn't finish it. Will she be okay on Friday? The harmonies his wife used to hum when she was alive, when she was well, when the future was still something they believed in. He sketched it out by ear, filling in the gaps with instinct and memory. Astrid peered over his shoulder, careful not to disturb him. Is that for the girl? He nodded for her. And for someone who couldn't finish it. Will she be okay on Friday? I don't know. That's not the answer you're supposed to give. It's the only honest one I have. She thought about that. Then she stuck another star on the corner of the page. For luck, she said. Stars are for luck, too. Alexandra, meanwhile, sat alone in her office long after everyone had gone home, long after the cleaning crews finished and the building settled into its nighttime silence. She opened an old file on her laptop, one she'd buried 3 years ago in a folder marked archive. Videos of Oliver at the piano composing, laughing, turning to the camera, and saying, if this works, Lexi, we're going to change lives. Not just treat symptoms, change lives. She'd filmed him because she'd wanted to remember. Then she'd buried the videos because remembering hurt too much. Now she played them on loop, volume low, so nobody in the building would hear, and let herself cry. Not the careful, controlled tears she'd allowed herself at the funeral. Real tears. The kind that left her face blotchy and her chest aching. The kind that meant she was still alive. On day 6, Constance asked a question she'd been holding for days. What happens if I fail? Elias didn't lie to her. They closed the room. I lose my job. Your mother blames herself. We all go back to how things were. That's a lot of pressure. Yes, that's not fair. No, she played the opening phrase, thinking, why does my mother care so much about this? She never cared before. Maybe she always cared. Maybe she just didn't know how to show it. Do you have kids? A daughter? Astrid? She's 7. Is she brave sometimes when she needs to be? What if I'm not brave enough? Then you fake it until you are. On the 7th night, Elias didn't give Constance any new techniques. He just sat beside her, farther away than usual, giving her space. Tomorrow, you lead. I'll be there in the room, but I won't play. You'll do this alone. Her hand shook. I am scared. Good. That's good. How is being scared good? Because fear means you care. Fear means this matters. Now, show the music you care more than you're afraid. Friday arrived cold and bright, the kind of morning that made promises it had no intention of keeping. The glass hall on the 20th floor captured the noon sun like a cathedral, light pouring through the floor to ceiling windows and refracting off the marble floors in geometric patterns that looked almost holy. A small crowd had gathered board members in expensive suits. Vivian with her clinical notes, the 2 independent physicians Alexandra had hired from the university hospital. William Cross with his arms folded and his expression neutral. Dante Wilkes checking his watch because he had another meeting at 1. Henry Cole stood by the door, making sure no one interrupted. No one came in late. No one turned this into a spectacle. Astrid sat in the front row, clutching the Silver Star sticker, ready to hold it up when her friend needed it. She'd missed school for this. Her father had written a note. Family emergency. It wasn't a lie. Constance wheeled herself to the piano slowly, giving herself time to breathe. Time to remember what Elias had taught her. Her hands were shaking. That was fine. Fear was fine. Fear meant she cared. Elias sat on a chair 10 feet away, close enough to be seen, far enough not to help, exactly where they'd agreed. Alexandra stood at the back of the room, her face unreadable, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying or keeping herself from reaching out. Nobody knew which. Constance placed her hands on the keys. The room went silent. She could hear her own heartbeat loud and fast. She could hear the ventilation system. She could hear someone's watch ticking. She closed her eyes and breathed. 3 in, 3 hold for out. She started. The opening phrase came steady, controlled. The rhythm locked in with her breath like Elias had shown her. The melody unfolded soft and clear, carrying through the glass hall with surprising power. 3 in, 3 hold for out. Her right hand trembled but held the notes. The star sticker on the first key caught the light. Then came the F sharp. The transition, the moment where everything broke or everything held. Her right hand tensed. The fear hit like ice water. The note didn't sound. Panic flickered across her face. The room held its breath. Someone coughed. Someone shifted in their chair. The sounds crashed over her like waves, threatening to pull her under. Elias didn't move, didn't speak, didn't help. Astrid slowly raised the star sticker, holding it up where Constance could see it if she opened her eyes. Constance remembered. Active silence. This was the moment she stopped playing, pressed the pedal lightly. The last chord sustained a bridge of sound across the silence. She counted on her left hand. 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. Breathed. 3 in, 3 hold, 4 out. Then she returned. Her finger found the F sharp. Pressed. The note rang out. Pure and true and perfect. The melody opened like dawn. Exactly the way Oliver had imagined it. Exactly the way music was supposed to feel when fear didn't win. She played through the transition, missed 1 note in the ascending run, but recovered instantly, muscle memory carrying her through and brought the phrase home to the final chord. She held it for 4 counts. Released, the hall was silent for 1 long beat. The kind of silence that feels like the world holding its breath, then applause. Scattered at first. Uncertain, then building, not polite applause. Real applause, the kind that means something. The 2 doctors were already writing notes. One of them approached Alexandra afterward while Constance sat at the piano crying quiet tears of relief. Measurable improvement in fine motor coordination, breath regulation, and anxiety management. What we just witnessed is clinically significant. The rhythmic training, the breath work, the psychological component. This is evidence-based therapy. What we saw was textbook pediatric neurodevelopment. The other doctor agreed. Music therapy is evidence-based for pediatric cerebral palsy. I published on this. What we just saw is exactly what the literature predicts. Documented improvement, reproducible outcomes. This should be a case study. William Cross for once said nothing. He looked at the data they were showing him, the clinical notes, the measurable outcomes, and nodded slowly. Numbers didn't lie, even when he wanted them to. Dante Wilkes looked at Henry Cole, who shrugged. Data is data, Henry said quietly. Can't argue with data. Alexandra took the microphone at the front of the room. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't effective immediately. The Arts and Health Fund will remain open and receive expanded resources. All disciplinary actions against Elias Bennett are dismissed and expuned from his record. We're also establishing the Morning Light Scholarship for children of Sterling employees with disabilities. Applications open next month. She paused, looking at Constance, then at Elias. And this room, the one we were going to close, will be renamed the Morning Light Room, dedicated to my late husband, who believed music could change lives. He was right. Henry Cole filed his report that afternoon. No violations found. Disciplinary recommendations withdrawn. Dante received a formal caution for attempting to manipulate internal procedures without adequate review, a career setback he'd spend the next 6 months recovering from. Williams' cost-cutting proposal was rejected by the board with a note attached. Future impact assessments must include qualitative and clinical outcomes, not just financial metrics. Leadership involves more than spreadsheets. Constance wheeled herself over to Elias after the crowd dispersed. After the doctors left, after the board members returned to their meetings and their metrics. Thank you, she said. Then, softer, almost whispering, I saw the dawn. Elias handed her a folded piece of paper. His handwritten reconstruction of Morning Light staff paper covered in careful notation. For someone who made a promise, he said quietly, placing it on the music stand. Your father, he'd be proud. Alexandra approached last. After everyone else had gone, after the room had emptied except for the 3 of them and Astrid, who was quietly putting star stickers on the piano keys. I was there, Alexandra said. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile, nothing like the CEO voice she used in meetings that first night. Behind the door, I heard you play his song, and I didn't know what to say, so I hid. Elias nodded. Sometimes we need permission to remember. She reached for the handwritten score, her fingers tracing the notes her husband had written in his mind, but never finished with his hands. He would have liked you. I would have liked to meet him. He died believing this mattered. I stopped believing. Thank you for proving him right. 2 weeks later, the morning lightroom had a new plaque installed by the door dedicated to Oliver Pierce, who believed music heals. Inside, Constance practiced twice a week under Vivian's supervision, with Astrid often joining to count stars and cheer and learn a little piano herself. Alexandra attended when her schedule allowed, sitting in the front row, no longer as CEO, just as a mother watching her daughter find something that had been lost. One evening, after the building had emptied and the cleaning crews had finished their rounds, the four of them stayed behind. Elias played the full version of Morning Light, the version he'd reconstructed from memory and love and grief, while Constance hummed along, finding the melody with her voice when her hands got tired. Astrid counted beats on her fingers, keeping time like a metronome made of starlight. Alexandra listened with her eyes closed, letting the music be what it was, a bridge between who they'd been and who they might become. Rain tapped the glass windows, softer now, more like conversation than drumming. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, constellations made by human hands. Inside, the piano sang. Constance looked out the window as the last edge of daylight broke through the clouds, painting the sky in colors she'd only read about in books. She turned to her mother and smiled. I saw the dawn, Mom. I really saw it. Alexandra reached for her daughter's hand. Elias glanced at Astrid, who stuck another star on the window. For the first time in 3 years, the room felt full. Not with furniture or plans or metrics. With something else, something that didn't need measuring to matter. The music continued. The night deepened, and somewhere in the space between the notes, healing happened the way it always does. Quietly, slowly, one half step at a